Well, hello, everybody. Hope everybody's got a lot of coffee in them, tea, Coke, because it's been a long day, folks. So I'm glad to have everybody here to talk about cultural care and really those connections and what can we do to maintain those connections. So just a little bit about myself. I'm with Coordinated Care. Does anybody not know what Coordinated Care is? Okay, good. Everybody knows all about Coordinated Care, the insurance provider for all the kids in foster care. So I am their community educator, so I'm also a therapeutic foster parent. We're pretty sure that Luann was the one who did my Pride training 20-ish years ago, 21 years ago. So that's how far back Luann and I go. And I think Luann had 20 years on me before then. So she's been doing this forever, folks. So always love getting to spend the evening with Luann and all of you amazing folks. So as Luann said, we are recording this. So please try to use the chat. If you want to hold your questions till the end, we will have a great Q&A session afterward where we'll turn the recording off so that way your voice isn't on the recording. So the training is about an hour and a half, so we have plenty of time for a Q&A. So please, as we're going through it, feel free to use chat to ask those questions. So with that, let's jump right in, folks. All right, and let me get that video panel up so I can see everybody's amazing faces. All right, folks, so let's jump right into it. So as I said, I'm here with Coordinated Care. If you're not familiar with all the different benefits and programs that we have, this gives you a really quick rundown of it. The most important thing out of this, call Coordinated Care or email the team if you have questions about healthcare coordination, finding a specialist, getting referrals, the Harvest Bucks, the My Health Pays programs, the Smart Start for Babies, all of those additional programs. You can just call into the team or you can email me. I'll make sure and throw my email address in chat at the end of this. So I always want y'all to be able to reach out to me at any time. Right. So I'm not going to read everything verbatim because you'll be able to pull the video and you will be able to get a copy of the slide deck if you want it, as well as you'll get training credit for this, so you can use that for your certifications for being a foster parent. So darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that, right? And how many of our kids are feeling like they are lost, feeling that they are in this overarching darkness and they don't know what's the way out, right? And it takes all of us, it takes a community to kind of come around and start, chipping away at that darkness, right? Showing them that there is people that care about them, that there is a community that cares about them, helping them see that they are going to be going back home and helping them get reconnected and staying connected with their families of origins, their chosen families. And how do we all do that? Well, there's many different ways we can do that. And one of them is really ensuring that we understand their culture that they're coming from and how we can better support them. So one of the big things I think we always kind of overlook is food, right? Food can be so healing, right? If I ask any of you, tell me about those special times when you would sit down to that family dinner, or you'd go to your extended family, aunts, uncles, grandparents, right? And you would have those great meals as a kid. Some of us can almost start salivating, right? And you can think about some of those foods, or in my case, the desserts. I was always the fiend who loved the desserts, right? And I can just think about that. I can remember the conversations we had, the connection, right? So when we're talking about cultural connections and what we can, do, don't think, oh, this has to be this huge endeavors of different things. No, it can be as simple as learning how to cook some of their cultural foods. Inviting the kiddos, if appropriate, into the kitchen with you. I work only with BRS teens, and we have our kids cook with us. We have our kids do shopping lists, right? We want them to be part of that process because that was such a critical, important thing in my household was the dinner, right? Everybody helped set up. Everybody had a role to play. If you didn't cook, you were the one cleaning, right? So there was always kind of that culture and expectations around food in our house. So kind of just think about in your mind's eye, when you hear that word identity, what does that bring up for you? And you don't have to answer, folks, but just kind of think about that. What do you incorporate just in that word identity? For some of us, it could be a religion. For some of us, it could be traditions. For some of us, it could be sports. For some of us, it could be history. For some of us, it could be art. For some of us, it could be so many different things, right? So one simple word means so many different things to different people. So I just want us to always think about that is when we're looking at our cultures, what can we do, right? There's plenty of fun things we can do. So I want us to think about just how critically important, it is for our identities with so many of the kids that we're working with. And imagine if you had to do this, and we usually do these when we're in person, so just kind of think about it in your mind's eye. If you had to sit down and describe yourself without using these specific identity kind of markers, right? If you couldn't, if you had to get to know someone and you couldn't use your religion, you couldn't talk about your family, you couldn't talk about your occupation, right? All these other things, right? These are different dimensions of your identity, and it would be really challenging, I think, for most of us to try to describe ourselves, right? Because our identity has such a core component for so many of us, right? It would be hard for me to even, really get to know any of you folks if I couldn't talk about these things because they're critical parts of who I am, right? So again, that's why we always want to save space for our kids so they can have these great conversations and know, more about their identities. So, and then this is just a more encompassing, thinking about when we're talking about identities, what are those aspects? Here's a broader perspective that some of our kids probably have experienced, right? They have different school and educational experiences. They're going to have different ethnicities. Some might have religious, right? They might have their own cultures, their own language, right? Traditions, music. How many of our kids, music is like to live or die by? Right? If you don't have teens, I got some teens you can take for respite, and you will learn that music is a critical component to who they are, right? Probably for some of us, when we were teens, music too was part of our culture, right? That was a great way for us to maybe do that, have the older generation call us the rebels, right? Because we were listening to different music, right? I'm a child of the 90s, so I'm Korn, Kurt Cobain stuff, right? That's kind of my generation, right? And that was considered such a whole cultural revolution, right? So different things are going to help us identify with each aspects of what makes up our culture. And what I want us to really think about is this right here, folks. Dimensions of identity. So what this is really talking about is the layering aspect, right? So like if Luann and I were going to go out to coffee for the first time, Luann's known me for 2 decades, so it's not a fair comparison. But if we were going to go out to coffee, I might tell Luann about some of the jobs I've had. I might tell her about, my corporate America jobs and then what got me into nonprofit. I might tell her about my very petite Old English Bulldog that's only 89 pounds, because if she was 90, she'd be obese, so she's 89 pounds. I might tell you about, my grandbabies, right? I might tell you about my husband, right? And these are just different dimensions of that identity, right? That make up who Nathan is, right? As you're kind of going around this circle, how many of these different dimensions do our kiddos have? Probably not a lot of them yet, right? Depending on the age of the kids, right? So just think about this, is that it's kind of that layering aspect, and that's what makes us who we are. As we go through experiences, as we start identifying, right, that becomes part of our culture, becomes part of our identities, and then that's how we start viewing the world. Right? So, I thought it was a real kind of an interesting thought-provoking question, is that, all those DNA, 23andMe, Ancestry.com, all those other brands that are out there, right, you can go do your DNA testings. Some people really find that really helps ground them, right? Because they kind of want to know where they came from. I'm a 3rd-generation foster parent, and my aunt adopted a kiddo right out of the NICU, never knew their bio family, went straight to foster care and then to her. And I always asked him, I was like, man, why are you doing these ancestries and 23andMe's, and why are you doing all this? You've always been a LaChine, and you're always part of our family. And it was a huge need for him to know where he came from. He wanted to find his siblings. He wanted to find his connection. As you can tell, obviously we're white Caucasian. He was a mixed youth, and that was something he really wanted to connect with his identity. And it was a big deal for my cousin to really go through and actually find out where they came from, to find that extended family, to hear about the stories, to hear about the aunts and uncles he never got to meet, to hear about the grandparents and the great-grandparents that he never got to meet, right? What if you didn't know where you came from? Would you want to find that root? Would you want to find those connections? Most people do. Not all, but a lot of people want to know. How many of our kids really don't know? How many of our kids might never know because they've been moved around so many times in foster care, or they came into foster care at such a young age, right? So kind of want to think about some of the prejudices and the assumptions that get, talked about, and think about what you're seeing in media nowadays. Think about what our youth are seeing in media. Think about what's on television, right? Think about we're in a very unique time in our world where people are connected so much, right? When I grew up in the 80s and 90s, we didn't have cell phones. Now kids are always having a cell phone with them, right? So they're hearing a lot of these things. They're seeing a lot of these, kind of judgmental things being said, right? Unfortunately, what does, our news media promote? Right? Usually it's a sensationalized and the stereotypical things, right? It's not the great wholesome stories. They always try to find, unfortunately, some of those more sensationalized stories and more of those dramas, right? So a lot of our kids are experiencing, the prejudice from that. Assumptions get made simply off of a person by their culture, by how they dress. How about ageism, folks? Right? How about racism, folks? Right? These things are what a lot of common thinking errors are happening, and they're getting reinforced consistently by media, and our kids are getting exposed to these things, right? Think about also the stereotyping that might happen. Think about the stereotyping or the thinking errors that happen from families of origins, between the foster parents and the family of origin, between the court systems, right? I've had many of my parents of my kiddos come to our house and have meals with us because they're part of our extended family. Right? But that family of origin first thought that we were only in it foster care to adopt. Right? So they always had those kind of stereotypes and those negative stereotypes of that it's always going to be one way, right? So I just want us to always remember that, of just thinking about some of those negative stereotypes, especially what does the media portray? What do movies portray? What does music portray? Right? If I asked any of us to, list 5 things we know about, rap music. Is it always the, is it the stereotypical things that are in negative stereotypes, or are there a whole bunch of positive reinforcing things about relationships, about culture, right? That's what we're kind of talking about, is that people make assumptions. Sorry, folks, it's a little late. Got to get my coffee buzz. So I thought this was really interesting, is that, all of us to a certain degree are kind of guilty of the stereotyping. And this example is actually kind of ironic, is that my husband is actually a violinist and a pianist. And this is actually something they really do now, is when they're doing auditions and they're doing tryouts, is that they actually will have them play behind a curtain. So the judges don't get any preconceived notions, right? So they don't know if the person is 10 years old, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. They don't know the race. They don't know the ethnicity. They don't know the gender of the person. They only truly get to hear the music, because they would make assumptions, especially when my husband has been playing piano for 20 years. If he's going out as a 25-year-old, if he's going out as a 32-year-old against somebody who's been playing for 40, 50 years, there might be some assumptions made, right? Would there be assumptions because of my husband's ethnicity? That's why they do these kind of blind trials, right? So all you really get to hear is the music, right? So none of your preconceived notions come into it, and you get to hear and learn from that music of who that person is without making any judgments. One of the reasons all of us, how many of us have read Chippers, BRS referral packets? How many of us, as we're reading those, start making an assumption? Right? I do my best to always have an open mind and try not to read those referral packets, because so much of what our youth are going through is situational, folks. But how many of us we kind of make assumptions as you start reading these 1 or 2 or 3 incidents? How many people tell me and my husband, why would you take teens in? They're the hardest to ever take in. They are the most challenging. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my most challenging kiddo broke doors, broke windows, assaulted my husband and I on almost a daily basis, was getting suspended from school. We had the police department at our house like every couple of days. Yeah, he was really rough, and he was only 8 years old. How many of you, as I was talking about this, made an assumption that I'm talking about a teenager? All right, folks, we're all guilty of some of these stereotypes. And that's what tonight's class was trying to explore with everyone. So we're going to skip over this because we are not in person. Fortunately, COVID changed everything, right? We don't get together as often as I would love to do some of these activities. So here's another way of really looking at it, kind of that iceberg analogy that we use on 20 different slides, right, folks? We see these all the time, but what are we actually able to see and observe? Well, very superficial things, right? So when we first meet people, what are we really looking at? We're just looking at superficial things, you know, kind of that stereotypical, do we handshake? Do we not handshake? Do we give a fist bump? Do we make eye contact, right? Is it appropriate for kids to make eye contact? Is it not? Right? My husband grew up in an Asian culture. It's not appropriate for kids to make eye contact. What in the dominant culture here in the United States, if a kid's not making eye contact with you, they're being disrespectful, right? So that's what we're talking about, is that there's a lot of these cultural nuances. And on the first, we just get to see the very top of that iceberg, right? Now, as we start deep diving and learning more, we see what's below the surface, right? We start to learn more about their education, about their religion, ideologies, right? Then we can start learning more about their beliefs and their values, right? There's so much more that's below the surface that you don't get to see unless you start having these conversations and you let go of some of those stereotypes, right, folks? And that's what we're here to do tonight, talking about this. So we're going to have two biases. If we break it up into bigger, kind of groups, you have your unconscious biases or implicit, and then you have your conscious explicit biases. So what can that look like, folks? Well, it can be based on preferences, biases, perceptions, interpretations. These can be reinforced through your own experiences, can be reinforced through your family, friends, can be reinforced through the media, right? Think about the family values that you have that might be a little strange to other people. I know we have customs at my house that are a little bit different than other people, right? And that's just the values we have. Like I said, around the dining room table and making dinner, whoever cooks, everybody else does the dishes and does the setup and the cleanup, right? That's just kind of the experiences that I had growing up. Those are the experiences I give to all of my kids, right? That's the expectation or the value in our household, is that everybody partakes in kind of the setup or cleanup of at least dinners, right? That is just what one of our values are in our house, is that we try to have dinners every single night together. So some of it we understand, some of it we don't. A lot of it is just something that we just do on a regular basis, right? Also, some of those values can be, we can be real comfortable with. And it does take a certain kind of person to, change and move forward and be a little different than the way they were raised, right? Think of us, I know so many of us have different cultural expectations. And even though you might not be practicing as part of like traditional religion, you might keep those practices because that's what you're raised with and that's what feels comfortable for you. Same thing with a lot of our kids. They're going to come to us with their own values. Now, what I want us to think about is we probably all have holding the golden rule, right? That's been around since even I was a kid, all right? You want to treat others as you wish to be treated, right? That's the golden rule. Well, I want to talk to you about the platinum rule, folks. And that is treat others the way they want to be treated, right? Our values and the rules may not always apply to them, right? Perception's reality, the way I see the world, is going to be a little bit different. How I consider and what I want to be treated might be a little bit different than how Luann wants to be treated, than how Marissa wants to be treated, right? Because we're all individual people. We're all individuals, right? So that's why we need to know and understand that how they want to be treated, how they want to be talked to, how they want to experience things is going to be a little bit different than how we do it, right? Because we're all individuals and we're all people. Think about just simply public speaking. How many of you, if I said, all right, we're going to go We're standing in class, and I invite each one of you one by one up front to the front of the class and say, all right, introduce yourself, tell me about yourself, tell me what you do for a living, tell me how many kids you got, how many of you be sweating bullets, right? How many of you would be glaring? How many of you would be sinking down in your chair hoping I don't see you, right? But what if you ask me? I'm in the front of the room. It doesn't bother me, right? I'm used to that. That's just the perfect example of like, I don't see there's any challenges of doing public speaking. How many of you, that would be a real big challenge? So if I was using the golden rule, I want to give everybody floor time to introduce themselves, just like I got to introduce myself. I'm trying to treat you all the way I want to be treated. The platinum rule would be opening that up and inviting you, if you'd like to come up to the front of the room and introduce yourself, right? We all kind of see the difference between those two. All right, I see lots of heads shaking, so yes. Right, so again, when we're kind of thinking about inclusion and equity, what does that really going to mean? Well, inclusion is going to be, everyone gets invited to this dance, where equity is you're being asked to come to that dance. Just like I'm asking you if you'd like to come up front, I'm asking you if you want to announce all about yourself and give us a little intro in front of the group, or am I expecting you, right? So those are the two differences between the inclusion is everybody is coming up front, everybody is going to talk about who they are, versus I'm asking if you want to come up front and you want to tell everybody, right? That's the big difference. They sound a lot alike, but there is a difference, is that I'm empowering and enabling and asking, right? Versus making that expectation that everybody's going to do it. So what did we find on some of our studies? Well, anybody who's like me and likes to geek out, shoot me an email. More than happy to send you the slide deck so you can get all the citations for this. But what they did find is that babies indicated they found the face to be the ordinary race itself has no ethnic meaning to babies per se, but children's brains notice skin color differences and are trying to understand the meanings of those, right? So what it's really coming down to is that the babies are really looking at just what's the difference, that superficial difference, right, is what they're looking at. And that's what Dr. Katz out of the University of Colorado, he followed 200 black and white children for their first 6 years, tested the children and their parents 9 separate times. And what we see on this continuum, they first started when they were 6 months old, and the babies were shown photographs of faces. Katz found that babies will stare significantly longer the photographs for faces that are of different races than their parents, because the baby's trying to understand, they're trying to interpret this, and they're just looking at those superficial differences, folks. And just as they were kind of following through and going with this, they would ask, this is kind of another study I really liked. It's interesting to me of how much we're able to put in value artificially when somebody, artificially says, oh, one group of people are better than the other. This was a couple of different studies out here. So this is the blue shirt and the red shirt one. Did anybody, just by show of hands, anybody ever see the old, that was like in the 70s, the brown eyes versus the blue eyes that the teacher did? Wasn't that just absolutely astounding? So for those of you that aren't familiar with it, the teacher was wanting to study how differences, you can elevate one group of people with a superficial, category, and to see the change where, so the kids started out as a homogenous classroom, the kids got along, they played together, they had lunch together, it was fine. One day the teacher said, all right, everybody with brown eyes, you get an extra 5 minutes of recess, you get to go to lunch early, right? And you don't talk to the blue eyes. So then that day, the brown eyes kids started picking on the blue eyes kids. The next day, the teacher changed it up and said, all right, everybody with blue eyes, you get to go to lunch early. You get that extra 5 minutes of recess, right? And the same thing kind of happened, right? So something as meaningless as eye color, just because somebody in authority told you, oh, this is better or worse, right? I think it's a very interesting study. You can find it on YouTube. It's been out forever, folks. So this is just kind of another version of it that we were talking about. But what they did is when they were asking, which colored teams would be better to belong to, which team might win the race, right? They would give the kids and have them line up and give them t-shirts, and they would use half blue, half red. right? And the kids were wearing them for 3 weeks. So this is a much longer study than the first one. And then the teachers were never mentioned colors and never grouped the students by the colors, but you would see is that they would actually start having differences and just an interesting study, right? So it was interesting that the reds never showed any hatred for the blues because there was nothing given to them saying that they were better or worse than than the blues. And that was what they were really trying to see, is that you can add those superficial experiments to it, and you can actually see that the kids, the difference doesn't bother them. It's when we start layering on different societal expectations. So again, this is just a study. Oh, good, we do have the Tuesday morning class. So this experiment, this was a 3-week-long experiment. I want to show the video, folks. So here we go. So this is the brown eyes and the blue eyes video that I wanted to show, folks. It's definitely old. Please, I forgive the quality of the video. This study has been kind of debunked, is that there was some concerns on how the study was done. But I really want us to just kind of think about is that, again, that homogeny that the kids had just because of eye color and because somebody in authority told them one's better than the other changed the kids. So if somebody can just give me a thumbs up when to make sure the audio comes through, I'd really appreciate it.
This is a special week. Does anybody know what it is?
National Brotherhood.
National Brotherhood Week. What's brotherhood? Treat everyone as though he was your brother. And is there anyone in this United States that we do not treat as our brothers?
Yes.
Who?
Yeah.
The black people. Who else?
Indians.
Absolutely, the Indians. Many places in the United States. How are black people treated? How are Indians treated? How are people who are of a different color than we are treated?
They don't get anything in this world.
Why is that?
Because they're different color.
You think you know how that would feel to be judged by the color of your skin? Do you think you do? No, I don't think you'd know how that felt unless you had been through it, would you? It might be interesting to judge people today by the color of their eyes. Would you like to try this?
Yeah!
Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Since I'm the teacher and I have blue eyes, I think maybe the blue-eyed people should be on top the first day. I mean, the blue-eyed people are the better people in this room. Oh, yes, they are.
Yeah.
Blue-eyed people are smarter than brown-eyed people. This is a fact. The brown-eyed people do not get to use the drinking fountain. You'll have to use the paper cups. You brown-eyed people are not to play with the blue-eyed people on the playground. Well, the brown-eyed people in this room today are going to wear collars so that we can tell from a distance what color your eyes are. Ready, Laurie?
Brown-eyed.
She's a brown-eyed. You'll begin to notice today that we spend a great deal of time waiting for brown-eyed people. I don't see the yardstick, do you?
It's probably over there. Hey, Miss Lady, you better keep that on your desk when the brown-eyed people get out of hand.
Oh, you think if the brown-eyed people get out of hand, that would be the thing to use? Who goes first to lunch?
Blue-eyed.
The blue-eyed people. Blue-eyed people may go back for seconds. Brown-eyed people do not.
Brown-eyed.
Don't you know?
Oh, they're not smart. And it seemed like when we were down on the bottom, everything bad was happening to us.
The way they treated you, you felt like you didn't even want to try to do anything.
It seemed like Mrs. Elliot was taking our best friends away from us.
What happened at recess? Were two of you boys fighting?
Russell called me names and I hit him in the gut.
What did he call you?
Brown eyes. They always call us that. They keep calling us brown eyes.
What's wrong with being called brown-eyed?
It means that we're stupider.
I watched what had been marvelous, cooperative, wonderful, thoughtful children turn into nasty, vicious, discriminating little third graders in a space of 15 minutes. Yesterday, I told you that brown-eyed people aren't as good as blue-eyed people. That wasn't true. I lied to you yesterday. The truth is that brown-eyed people are better than blue-eyed people. Russell, where are your glasses?
I forgot them.
You forgot them. And what color are your eyes?
Blue.
Susan Ginder has brown eyes. She didn't forget her glasses. Russell Ring has blue eyes, and what about his glasses? He forgot them. Yesterday we were visiting, and Greg said, boy, I like to hit my little sister as hard as I can. That's fun. What does that tell you about blue-eyed people?
They're naughty.
The brown-eyed people may take off their collars, and each of you may put your collar on a blue-eyed person. The brown-eyed people get 5 extra minutes of recess. You blue-eyed people are not allowed to be on the playground equipment. You blue-eyed people are not to play with the brown-eyed people. Brown-eyed people are better than blue-eyed people. They're smarter than blue-eyed people. And if you don't believe it, look at Brian. I use Orton Gillingham Phonics. We use the card pack. The brown-eyed children were in the low class the first day, and it took them 5.5 minutes to get through the card pack. The second day, it took them 2.5 minutes. The only thing that had changed was the fact that now they were superior people. You went faster than I've ever had anyone go through the card pack. Why couldn't you get them yesterday?
We had those collars on.
You think the collars kept you?
just keep thinking about those collars.
Oh, and you couldn't think as well with the collars on.
Well,
4 minutes and 18 seconds. How long did it take you yesterday?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. How long did it take you today?
4 minutes and 18 seconds.
What happened?
One down.
What were you thinking of?
This.
I hate today.
How do you do? I hate too.
Because I'm blue-eyed.
See, I am too.
There's nothing, it's not funny, it's not fun, it's not pleasant. This is a filthy, nasty word called discrimination. We're treating people a certain way because they are different from the rest of us. Is that fair?
No.
Nothing fair about it. We didn't say this was going to be a fair day, did we?
No.
And it isn't. It's a horrid day. Okay, you ready? What did you people who are wearing blue collars now find out today?
I know what they felt like yesterday. I did too.
How did they feel yesterday?
Down. Like a dog on a leash. Yeah. Like you're chaining them up into prison. And you're throwing the key away.
Should the color of some other person's eyes have anything to do with how you treat them?
No.
All right, then should the color of their skin?
No.
Should you?
All right, folks. It kind of keeps going on for a little bit more with just those reflections. What I want us to kind of use is just these are a couple of reflective questions, or you can just talk about like what stood out to you in that video. Please use chat because we are recording, but what kind of stood out to you, folks? And I'll kind of get the ball rolling. What I found really interesting was the flashcards that the teacher said they went through, right? How the first time around it took them like 5.5 minutes and the second time around was 2.5 minutes. That significant difference just by empowering them and telling them that they're special and they're smart changed their educational performance that drastically. So what else kind of stood out to you, folks? So you can either answer that or use one of the reflective questions of think of a time when you felt excluded from an event or group of people, or you can use the other one of name a few ways how that feeling of exclusion impacted you. And there's no right or wrong answers, folks, so take all the time you need to put it in chat. Yeah. Sad and angry, treated differently because of my religion. Amazed how quickly the kids behaved according to what the teacher told them would be appropriate behavior for their group. Yeah. Yeah. These are great comments coming in, folks. Please read them as I'm doing it. It's definitely interesting how quickly the kids change. Didn't experience shared moments, connection of thoughts and emotions, question why I was being excluded. Yeah, that's a lot. Feeling disempowered. Yeah. Yeah, we've all experienced those things. I appreciate everybody, sharing. And if you want to finish up your final thoughts, please keep them coming in chat, and I'll read them as I go through. But this is just something I really want us to really think about, is that the messaging that we tell our kids is so critically important, right? Every time the kids come into our home, my husband and I tell all of our kids, you're our kiddo, you're part of our family, we love you, right? And telling them that, and even with my teenagers, if you don't have a teenager, if you ever tell your teenager, hey, I love you, your teenager's gonna be like, blah, 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 you don't really love me, or that's, we tell them that because we want them to always know that they're loved. Because those simple acts and just changing the vernacular of telling them they're loved, we believe in them, they're smart, right? Because what if so many of the kids that are in systems of care heard? What do you think the messaging, and please use chat, folks, what do you think are the messages that kids and families that are in systems of care have heard, whether it be from people, whether it be from society, right? Are they positive messages like all the blue eyes kids were getting? Or are they negative messages like a lot of those brown eyes kids were getting? Right? And then think about, that they don't belong, they don't deserve to have their needs met, right? Oof. Bethany, yeah, you're a burden. Yeah, that's powerful. It's your fault. You must be a bad parent. You must be a bad kid. You must have done something wrong. Ooh, Jay, that one hits home too, Jason. Yeah. You hear that's where they want to be? Yeah. Defective. There's no hope. Oof. Wow, I didn't realize it was going to be this strong of a night. Yeah, those are really true, folks. And if something is simple in that video from the 70s that only was third graders and only lasted one day, and the performance changed and the friendships changed and even how they viewed themselves changed just in one school day, how much of an impact do you think these messages, when people are hearing them day in and day out for weeks, months, or years at a time, can impact them? All right. So I appreciate everybody that contributed. Right, this is a lot to really kind of think about. So, what are we kind of looking at, and what are we looking for? Is right. Well, we want to seek to understand, then be understood. We want to always be accepting of other people's and their beliefs, their thoughts. Right. We care and we want to learn. Right. Because we want to find those common grounds. And you know what? You're going to find that all of us have common grounds with everyone around us, right? We're more alike than we are different, right? We always want to understand. We also want to make sure that we don't fall back into those stereotypes. And you know what? It's okay. We all have room for growth, right? And when we reevaluate, when we think about something and you go, hey man, I should have handled that a little bit different. What's that why behind that? Is that because that's how I was raised? Do I really believe that? My great thing that I absolutely love is fact checking myself. Is that a rational fear that I'm having? Or is that a bias I'm having? Because guess what? Right now, these little computers have access to all the information on the world. We can find out real quick, right? We can learn. It's okay to challenge our own beliefs, and sometimes we do make mistakes, right? All of us do. Right? So again, just think about, when you get excluded and you don't know why, or it's based on incorrect information, think about the challenges and the hurt that you have with it, folks. Right? Think about just how many perceptions would you give of walking down a street and you see a certain group of people, right? Unfortunately, those negative stereotypes, right, are very pervasive. Now I'm going to show a video. It starts out with just a little tap dancing in the background. So if somebody can just put their thumb up, let's see if I can get this video to play. And forgive, it's a YouTube video, so it'll have to have the ad. I think my computer needed a little more coffee. All right, folks. So let's go ahead and use chat. What do we think about that? How much information was being assumed about each person in there? Right? Every one of them was judging each other. Everyone had a stereotype that they were thinking that other person is. Anybody see it coming that the granny was the thief? Stealing that Snickers bar? Right?
I missed that.
That was right at the end. She pocketed the Snickers bar into her purse.
And
right?
of course, I wasn't suspecting it.
Exactly. And that's what, this video is trying to show, is that each one of those characters, without saying even one word to each other, had stereotypes that they were assuming. Oh, Jason, it's always the granny. Right? They were all making these assumptions about each other. Right? Without one word being exchanged, they were assuming mainly positive or mainly negative things. Unfortunately, mainly negative things, right? Think about how many of our families are experiencing this, right? It might not just be the grocery store they're going to, but think about if you had to go for an evaluation, have to go to the courthouse, have to go to DCYF, right? So we got some great comments coming in, right? Smile breaks of fear. Yeah, connection, right? All three of those people were probably, concerned about each other and what each other might do, when in reality, none of them were going to do anything to each other, right? They made those negative assumptions. Let's see, we got another comment. Sadly, this is the world we live in, and it's only getting worse. I think we have a lot of opportunities that present themselves, and I appreciate everybody that's in this conversation tonight, and I always encourage to take what we learn here and try to move it forward and pay it forward to the next group of people you run into, and try to break these stereotypes, because unfortunately these stereotypes are usually wrong, they're usually negative, and they're usually hurtful. Each one of those characters had a lot of negative stereotypes about each other, right? And we made assumptions. They made so many assumptions, and then you find out the little old lady was the one that was stealing the Snickers bar. Right? Did you see as the kid was walking towards the door to grab that apple, the buildup? Did you see the sweat coming down the shopkeeper's forehead when he was thinking he was going to get robbed? Like, what was he doing reaching underneath the counter? What was that? Right? I mean, there was just so much of that. Let's see, we got another comment. So, smile can be a quick and easy way to make a connection and therefore remove fear. Being neutral about people helps. If they haven't actually done anything, it's right. It's not right to assume, and I think that's the key right there. Zara's right. So many people make assumptions and assume different things about each other, and we need to be open. We need to be human to one another, and I bet you're going to find I have some of my best connections and relationships with people that I've are of different places. I just came back from a vacation and got to experience people from all around the world and different cultures and different food, different music, right? And that enriches me as a person. So I appreciate everybody's comments. And all right, folks, let's go on. Hey, look, I actually had it downloaded. All right, so when we're talking about what is culture, well, culture, can kind of be broken down into these really kind of broad categories, folks. But so when we're talking about it, we kind of have those values. So that's going to be kind of those expectations within the family unit, within the community, expectations, or kind of how some of the kids judge what's important in their life, right? Could also be how some of the social groups that the kids are experienced around, could be spiritual, but also the school, could also be the after school activities, right? Think about the culture. I grew up in a rural community, and in my elementary school, we had mottos, we had social emotional learning, we had pajama Fridays, right? You had your mascots. High school, middle school, all had their own social emotionals and their own kind of culture within each of those groups. When I did sports, my wrestling days were very different than when I was doing some of the football stuff, right? Those are almost their own little mini cultures, right? Because there's different expectations, right? If I had, think about when you were in school, especially in high school, if you had the Leatherman jackets, right? You were kind of seen differently just because of the superficial thing, right? Think about the food and the family that you would exchange. Think about the clothing, right? Think about just even, personal hygiene and skincare, and think about, the culture around, what, when you're getting ready in the morning and who helps the kids get, ready for school. Think about all the different types of hair and what goes into ethnic hair care, right? All of those things are part of that culture. Think about also some of the attitudes of how within that culture, is there stereotypes of other cultures, right? Definitely could be. Is there positive or negative stereotypes, right? Think about the traditions, right? Think about in your families of origin with our kiddos, how many of them had different traditions than you or I, right? How many of them celebrated different things during the holiday seasons? How many of them had different food to celebrate that, right? I know in my family we had different dishes that we only did during certain holidays and certain get-togethers, right? Because those were like the super special holidays that you only did during those times, right? My family's old school. We actually had china that we only brought out for certain occasions and certain times of the year, right? And that was a tradition. My aunt had a formal dining room. Guess when we got to use a formal dining room? Only on special things. Guess how many of us kids knew not to go into the formal dining room because that's where all the good china was, and that's, right? That was just a tradition in our family. So what can youth culture look like? Oh my gosh, right? Our kids are kind of screaming to be independent, not fit into a box, be their own unique person. What can that really look like? Well, look like a lot of different things. Think about just yourself. When you were a kid, how many of these would have applied to you as well, right? I can definitely tell you the style of dress I started changing into was very different than what my family originally wanted. The music I listened to, right? The music videos, right? I'm the actual MTV generation, not what MTV is now with like Survivor and all that, but the real music videos, right? That's what it was for me. Think about our kids that you're working with right now. Think about the language they're using. The language is totally different. Think about the modality. Do a lot of our kids like to actually talk, or do they like to text? Right? How many of our kids will tell you, oh, I spent 8 hours amazing playing and spending time with my friends. And you're like, wait a minute, you've been in your room the whole day. Yeah, but I was online and I spent 8 hours with them. We had great time. And you're like, to me, I'm like, how? But for a lot of our kids, right? That feels comfortable to them now. Think about piercings, tattoos, changing of hair color, right? All of those things, is kind of part of that youth culture as they're trying to really find themselves. Think about how many times they might change kind of those, are they a jock? Are they a goth? Are they a heavy metaler? Are they a skater? Heck, I remember parkour culture. Does anybody remember parkour culture? That was like a big thing like 10 years ago where the kids like always had to be the most extreme jumping from thing to thing. Right? That was kind of their thing. Think about also what they might choose to celebrate. They might also start exploring their own religion. They might start exploring and questioning values within the, kind of the social construct. So youth culture can be all over the place for normal developing youth. Think about our kids that are neurodivergent, have experienced traumas, right? They don't even have that, kind of grounding pad because they've been moved so many times. They're trying to find out which one of these dabs of culture do I like? Which parts of these maybe little pieces of religion I picked up, knowledge I've picked up, right? You know how many of our foster kids have 5 placements? 10 placements? Right? My husband and I work with BRS teens. Most of our kids are 15 to 20 placements before they come to us. Right? So our kids are looking for their own identities and their own culture. Sometimes they know it, sometimes they don't. Okay? So let's talk about, sexual discrimination. Unfortunately, something we are still talking about in our society is that people are being judged just by their gender, right? It's totally inappropriate. It's totally wrong, but we still see this happening, right? We see this happening, especially if somebody might be gender fluid, part of the LGBTQI plus communities, right? That there's a lot of discrimination that happens. There's a lot of things that our society says about people simply off of their gender, right? Think about pregnancy. Organizations that won't hire somebody who's pregnant, right? Think about our gender diverse youth. Think about what are they hearing in media right now, right? There's so much sexual discrimination that's happening, and it can be very blatant, right? It can be very subtle as well. Oh, well, I don't know if that's the right job for you, if that's the right chore for you because you're this, right? Well, let's think about ageism, adultism, right? I will admit I am guilty of it. I'll bet you I'm not the only one here that thinks that, oh, this next generation, man, they're just so lazy. They're just so not engaged. I don't know how they're going to make it in the real world. How are they going to have a job? How are they going to do this? How are they going to have that, right? What does that do for these kids when they're hearing those consistent messages, right? When are you going to grow up? When are you going to act your age? When are you going to act like an adult, right? All these prejudices that the kids are experiencing, and happens to all of us, right? Kind of my parents' generation probably thought a lot of negative things about my generation, and I think sometimes some negative things about the next generation. We're just reliving these same cycles, right? Think about how ageism, especially in today's age, where we're living longer, and all of us are working into older ages. Have any of us ever been judged solely off of our age when we're applying for a position? Right? Think about all the judging that's happening to our kids, right? So when we're talking about our own biases, and what we're really talking about is, how are we going to confront them? We need to always be looking at, the solutions. We need to be encouraging the strengths. We need to always talk with our own selves about, where did this come from? Why are we thinking this way? Is it because I watch this much TV? Am I watching this news? Is it because that's what my family of origin taught me, right? Where did that come from? And that's the important thing, is that we have to be willing to evaluate our own, behaviors. When these people walked into that convenience store, why was everybody assuming, this African-American teenager is going to be the one to shoplift? Negative stereotypes, right? Why is that teenager thinking that all Granny does is have false teeth and play bingo? Negative stereotypes, right? We need to always be sitting down and trying to identify, where did those come from? And we always really need to be looking at, those strength-based, right? So when we're talking about strength-based, this is same example. It's just reframing it to be a strength, right? So Sonia always thinks she is right when she is wrong. I hope I don't have to deal with her today. Well, let's look at it from a strength approach. Sonia knows how to stand up for herself, even if it isn't always correct. It's good to know how to be your own advocate, especially when you may lack that kind of support. All right? The same person, right? They had the same action. How I respond and how I choose to either articulate it, am I using a deficit or am I using a strength? Because I'll bet you a lot of our kids are amazing advocates when they've had lack of support, right? Restorative justice models, TBRI, trust-based relational interventions are so key working with our kids, folks. Reframing is so important, to always be looking at the strengths, right? How many times are we always looking for what they do wrong versus what they do right? Our society has us that way, right? Think about when I get pulled over when I'm driving up to Luann's house and I get pulled over, the officer doesn't pull me over and go, "Hey, Nathan, you've been doing the speed limit the whole way. Great job." Or is the officer pulling me over because I did something wrong, right? Our kids do amazing things every single day. And if you start focusing on those positives that they're doing, the strengths versus the deficit or the weaknesses or the things they're doing wrong, you're going to start getting that shift, right? We all talked about the brown eyes and the blue eyes and how just the teacher saying brown eyes are, they forget their glasses and blue eyes are better because I'm blue eyes, right? Changed how quickly they got through their flashcards. Imagine how much behavior changes you can change in your kiddos just by focusing on the strengths and the positives that they do. So, again, I'm not going to read this just because you'll get a copy of the slide deck. All right. So, does anybody have questions? I want to invite you. I know I've just been rambling a lot and we've used chat, but if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in chat. We will have a Q&A session at the end so everybody can get off mute and talk. So, what do we know about kind of that racial identity development? And, well, we know separating the child, they're not able to understand sometimes their own racial ethnicities. They're not understanding where they're kind of grounded, where they're connected to, where they came from. Not understanding their own heritage, their own culture, can be very challenging for a lot of our kiddos. They don't feel that they know even where they fit into the world at times, right? Very hard to know your trajectory if you don't even know where you came from, right? How do they navigate, especially if they're biracial and they're multiracial? How do they navigate going from 5, 10, 15, 20 different homes? Right? Think about the discrimination that these kids are already facing. Think about the negative self-messaging that these kids are already telling them. Think about what does our culture say about kids that are in foster care? Right? I mean, just that alone. Is it a positive message that the kids are hearing, or is it a negative message they're hearing about being in foster care? About their family of origin? Right? Again, those consistent messages that those kids hear change their educational performance in one school day. What do you think it's doing to our kiddos every single day? So, some of the unhealthy ones versus our healthy ones. The negative stereotypes some of our kids will have even about themselves, their own culture. They might, always have a negative self-image. They might associate that, it's their, fault for things, it's their culture for these things, right? And what we really want to be doing is help them identify and find how can we connect them with family that's safe? How can we connect them with community members that are safe? How can we support those connections? What can you do in your own home, right? Everything from as simple as cooking to celebrating different holidays to even the artwork, folks, that you have in your home can help these kids feel more connected and grounded to their culture, right? All the artwork behind me is LGBTQI+, right? Focused. How do you think it feels when my teenagers come into the house and they are seeing a supportive family because they see just the artwork as part of the queer community, right? Look around your house. I'd encourage you after today's class to just kind of look around and see, what does your house even say about you, folks? Right? We have a blended family. I'm at 6 grandbabies. I'm beating Luann. I have more grandbabies than she does, right? I mean, we're just this huge family and a conglomerate of all these different cultures and ages and generations, right? And our house really reflects that. And a lot of our kids come in feeling safe when they kind of see those things. What's the first thing the kids see in your household? Right? So I really think this is one of those things that's super easy now. 20 years ago, a little bit harder because the internet wasn't what it is. Now it's really easy to learn about different cultures. I am a history nerd. I absolutely geek out on history, and those are things that I share with our kids, right? Where do they come from? Where do their culture, where do their ethnicities come from? What's the history? Who is the famous people? What are some of the famous events in history? What are some of the celebrations? I try to cook. My husband does all the cooking, but I try to cook, and we'll try to cook different ethnic dishes, right? These are really easy things now that we can access and we can learn. There's also the amazing events pages on most of the websites around there, right? So if you want to go and you want to learn about Hispanic heritage, if you want to learn about Mayan culture and Mayan celebrations, if you want to learn about Buddhism, if you want to learn, right? There's so many easy things we can do on the internet now to learn and to help the kids identify and explore with them. Why can't you be passengers on their ship of exploration together? Right? Why can't we help them try on different parts of their culture? Why can't we learn together how to cook, how to do any of these cultural things that are so appropriate for them? Why can't we just be part of that journey? No reason we can't. So again, making sure that we're very understanding of around holidays. Something that was kind of hard for me was always remembering that not everybody celebrates the same holidays that I celebrate. How am I incorporating that with my kids? How are we incorporating different religious holidays into our household and into our practices, right? What are you doing to be that flexible around, especially holidays, for moving kids from, with the family of origin, the extended family, our family, right? You have to be that real flexibility with them. I highly encourage always having the kids be able to spend time with that family of origin when and where appropriate, or how do you connect them with that family of origin? Especially during these holidays, we always have our kids and go out, and when we're buying gifts, the kids get to buy gifts for their families of origins, especially their siblings. My tradition at our house is we make our own wrapping paper. So my family literally during the holidays was so financially strapped that my mom made wrapping paper. That was the greatest memory I have of all the holidays, is that she would make her own wrapping paper. So we make our own wrapping paper. It's just kind of a family tradition now. And the kids are able to wrap presents for their siblings and have those additional kind of that connection, right? Understanding the trauma that goes with being separated. I don't watch Hallmark movies anymore, right? Especially during the holiday and all these Hallmark movies come on, folks. They're never about blended families, and they don't talk about foster care a lot of times in a positive light. And, these kids don't get to see themselves, in the movies. And that can be really challenging. How are you being inclusive? How are you updating? I used to be very traditional in what we would cook during the holidays. We adapt with each of our kids. We ask them what some of the dishes they want to have at our dining room table, especially during the holidays and the big get-togethers. I can't tell you how many times I've used YouTube to make different things, right? It's so much easier now to be able to learn how to cook culturally sensitive meals that our kids love, even if they don't know how to make them. Ask family of origin for the recipes, right? A lot of the families of origins would feel pretty honored if you're asking, hey, can you send me a copy of XYZ, right? So again, this is just some of the other things, and asking that family of origin for recipes. Why can't you ask that family of origin too for if there's blankets that the kids like, if there's stuffed animals the kids like, ask them what their favorite bedtime stories are, ask them, the family of origin, is there services you want them going to, right? There's lots of things that it's just a phone call away or an email away, folks, right? So this is just some of those kind of conversation starters that we can always have. I'm not going to make us go through these. You'll get it in the slide deck if you want a copy. All right, as we're kind of winding down for the night, folks, kids are always going to come to us and they're going to have their own thoughts and opinions. And, a lot of us probably have heard of like our DEI lens, right? Well, think about it. Our kids also have a lens, right? Everything our kids do always makes sense, right? Because from their perspective and their life experiences, it does make sense. And I want us to always remember that, is that the kids are going to come to us. They may be highly interested in their culture. They may not be. They might have their own belief systems, right? They might have their own value systems. It's all going to be from what they've experienced, right? And that's where we have to be open and we have to talk with them. And we also have to be willing to admit, like, hey, I don't know that. Let's learn this together. I can tell you, you do not lose anything of that power as like the caregiver, the adult in the situation. If you say, I don't know, let's fill in the blank together, right? Let's go on the internet together. Let's go to this event. Let's go do this or that, right, folks? You don't lose anything by just saying, hey, I don't know that. I think there's a misconception as an adult, I'm supposed to know everything. I don't know everything. I'm still figuring it out, and I've been a quote unquote professional parent for 20 some years, and I'm still figuring out how to parent some of our kids, right? So when we do run into biases and discrimination, I want to add a caveat to this: is that when and where it's safe for you to do this and you feel comfortable doing it, I always think it's appropriate to confront those, saying that's not correct, that's hurtful. Provide some education when we're appropriate, right, folks? Because if we're just going past, right, I'm a 40-year-old male, it doesn't hurt me if I hear somebody saying discouraging remarks, but you know what? The 8-year-old kid in the aisle over that hears that, it's going to hurt them, right? So when and where it's safe and appropriate, please ask them, why do you believe this, right? We want to try to have those confrontations when we can and when it's safe to do so, folks. Especially I like to ask the kids, like, well, why do you think that? Or where'd you hear that? A lot of my kids will have some negative stereotypes, and sometimes just asking them, like, well, do you think that's true? No, it's just funny. Well, why would it be funny? What makes that funny, right? And just try to help them kind of process that with our kids. When you're out in the community, it can be a lot harder to have those brave and courageous conversations. I encourage you to have those when it's safe and appropriate to. Well, we're talking about diversity. Well, this is what we're really thinking about, We want our kids to always, think about both sides of a topic or an issue. We want them to not always blindly
Nathan, you muted.
Forgive me, folks. My computer seems to think I'm muted.
You're okay now. It muted when you went on to point 2.
All right, can you hear me now, folks?
Yep.
Can anyone hear me? Okay, you can hear me now? Okay. Technology. See, Luann, this is why we shouldn't be working after 5 o'clock. All right, so I love that I was about to say, listen carefully, and you all couldn't hear me, so there's some irony in that one, right? So we always want to listen to what our kids are telling us, and we want to kind of explore that. What does that look like? Where's the whys? How are they getting that information? We want to always respond to our kids where it's neurotypical appropriate for them. So I dislike this as child's age. How many of us have kids that are 14 or 15 years old and their self-coping skills are like a 10-year-old, their self-regulation skills are like an 8-year-old, their education levels maybe like an 11-year-old, right? So don't always think about a child's chronological age. You want to think about their neurological age, right? It's something to really think about in our responses, because I actually have kids that are 15 and 16 that I'm teaching the same social emotional skills that I'm teaching my oldest granddaughter. I don't demonize my kids. We just work from where they are, right? And we just build them up from there. So, and then we always want to share thoughts and encourage family of origin involvement when and where we can. Oh, thanks, David. I almost always work weekends and evenings. I work weird shifts, but I just got back from vacation, so this is a little late for me. So we want to talk about diversity. So especially we want to encourage the curiosity. We want to encourage them to model good behaviors. We want them to feel comfortable. We always want to also increase opportunities for our youth to experience different cultures, customs. Can be as simple as just taking them out to a show. Could be taking them out to different cultural events, right? Here in the Puget Sound, we have amazing blended cultures, and there's amazing community centers in most major cities that you can take your families to. A lot of low to no cost events. We take our kids to multiple events every year. And it's a fun way of really talking and being able to explore the whys behind it. We took one of our kids up to celebrate Chinese New Year 5-6 years ago, and they were so curious. They're like, well, why is it New Year? It's not December 31st, January 1st, right? We got to have that conversation of, well, that's because, it's the Chinese custom to follow the Lunar New Year, and we got to talk about that, right? So you always want to create those opportunities when and where you can. I love to invite families of origin out to these outings, especially maybe when I don't know them as well, because this way it allows us to have those opportunities and that shared joy of these kids learning and experiencing things together. Because ultimately, right, it's a community that supports the families, and when my kiddos go home, I want to be part of that extended family, right? I always want to be the cool uncles where the kids can always come back. All right, so what can we do from here? We've talked about it numerous times. Plenty of resources out there. A lot of great books, a lot of great information on the internet, a lot of YouTube videos you can easily get, a lot of cultural events. I encourage, actually, I like going into the communities and really doing interactive, immersive things versus just like watching a video, because I feel like it's a better engagement for some of my kiddos. But again, you also need to, make sure that it's appropriate for your kiddo, that they don't get overstimulated. Because sometimes our kids, it can be really challenging if they're in a new place, lots of noises, lots of people, right? So plenty of resources. If you ever have challenges finding local events, jump on the internet, type in your city's name, and put in cultural events. You will be surprised. There are events going on year-round, folks. So some of the resources, folks, that are out there, and again, you'll get all the slide decks, so you don't have to try to just write all these down, but if there's a cultural competencies, Casey Family Programs does some great things. This is the disproportionality report. It's old, it's from 2013. This is all the different resources that are available to you folks. Again, you'll get the slide deck, so this is just more resources that are available to you. All right, folks. Let's go ahead and, Luann, if you want to stop recording, let's go ahead and